Diddy picks little white girls off the street. Did you see the little white girl that Diddy picked up off the street and said he adopted her like Madonna? It was this little white girl. Did you know Diddy hates white people? He believes that they lynched all the people from Black Wall Street. He uses the N word all the time, and he's in jail.
What was it? I don't know, but easy on the cocaine and the Red Bull, bro. You're going a little. I love Red Bull. Do you love Red Bull? I love Red. Wow. So, so the answer is it's a nepotistic industry. Like, if you know people, you have family in the business, you get the. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to be good. You're probably better off if you're.
Well, it's interesting because we have like in our town. I live in Ventura County. It's a little town. It's Rupert Murdoch's town. You know exactly the town we're talking about. And there's a lake here. He pretty much built the lake here. And so there's a sports agent whose mom was a sports agent, and he was a sports agent. Now he just sells houses to athletes. He got out of that sports agent business, you know, because it kind of burns you out and stuff. And so he uses all of his contacts. But to get into like being in CAA and ICM and all, those all mailrooms are filled with licensed attorneys. It's like you wonder, like, why are you
William
doing
Morris,
this?
WME, and UTA.
Yeah, they're all like,
Alcohol.
exactly.
Right. Not just one.
I know all of them. I know everybody.
You need the ladies, you need the booze.
But they really run the show. That's another thing I'll mention. For, I don't know, it was Adrian. I might be gone. I know this is a good question. The talent agents run Hollywood. You know, I mean, they're without them, you can't get talent. You can't do anything. They really hold the keys to it.
But see, Dr. Mitch, I had my neighbor, I had a really nice voiceover guy, right? He was my next door neighbor, and he had built a $400,000 soundstage in his house. He was the voiceover for Fred Flintstone and the Minions. And for Johnny Depp, he did Looking into the Something Glass. I don't remember that movie. But anyway, he's a really big voiceover guy. And he was a Trump supporter. And it was really interesting because, like, in 2020, down our street, people found out, like, on Twitter, I guess, because that was Twitter back then, that he was a Trump supporter. They used to protest on our street. And so he ended up moving. And he went to Nashville. Yeah, because there's a big industry. They moved to Nashville, him and his wife. I was, like, best friends with his wife. I don't understand, like, poor guy. He was so nice. They're such a nice family. But
I was gonna say if they're Christian, if
they were Christian. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, so then they get blacklisted Christian.
Okay, but isn't that what your DNA test is based
Yeah,
on?
but I don't know what my blood is. This is a very blooded quantum kind of thing. I don't know anything about North Africa. I don't care.
North Africa, that's Algeria, Morocco.
Well, I know that.
So if your father, his parents
My great
his
grandparents, then I
great
remember that.
grandparents
It's not part of
are from North Africa, then those genetics have been passed on.
correct.
Okay, so then you're an African.
I don't know who's more retarded, Ludwig or Yael. It's hard to determine, but I know it's Shabbos, so Yael is definitely in violation of Shabbos. She's no Jew, ladies and gentlemen. She's a fake Jew. She's a Zionist spy, and she came here to cook you. She's gonna cook you. You thought you were gonna cook a Zionist? Oh no. Yael's a good Zionist.
PTR legit?
What was that?
PTR? I don't. Yes.
I don't have Apple Cares. That says you.
What do you mean? You're what?
If it's a picture of you, like my screen might crack. Like
Oh.
I have DNA. I am not North African because culturally I didn't grow up with North African. It's so far back in my family lineage. It's not something I relate to.
you should be very happy for not being white.
I know I'm not white. My
Well-
family's Middle Eastern. I'm aware of this.
Amir or Pearl, if you're listening, can you remove streaming rooms on this app.
Oh yeah, he's that guy you read about.
Yeah, he's that guy. Yeah.
Adrian, but
Bye, Adrian. Bye, Adrian. You're not wanted here. We're Islamic fascists. You're gone. You're out of here. Islamic fascism is number one. Islamic fascism forever and ever and ever.
Get the fuck out of here, bitch. Nigga, this.
Got that.
Shoot that N-word! Shoot that N-word! It's amazing. They just keep talking as I'm whistling. It's like I'm not even there.
Yes.
Hail Lucifer!
My good friend Adrian, how are you, my love?
Blasphemer! 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 Would you?
Get that. It's actually pretty cool. Did you?
Yeah.
I went to this Catholic, I went to a monastery over here in DC, and went to a service which was beautiful. And after the service, the nuns, they're like older white women. Well, I don't know where were the black, no black nuns, but anyway, these older, I like older women, right? So I went like in one of the little rooms that's kind of dark, and they were like burning me incense, and I kind of like pulled my cock out just to see if they would, one older lady, white lady, looked at it. She did look at it. I think she wanted to give me some vagina. I really do believe that. She looked at it,
So what would you?
I love my story.
Wait, Hermes, I gotta ask Lucifer. What would you do at a Diddy freak off party? Like, what would make it extra spicy?
What?
I would probably be the type of dude that watches. I like to watch, so I would probably watch, maybe get some head, but I would like to watch. Me personally. So, it's not like, a Diddy freak off party is just a fucking orgy, man. It's just like you've never been to a swing party. Like, jeez. What happened to Adrian?
I've done that a lot. I don't give a
Bring him up, please.
No, I didn't throw him down. I don't throw him
Vice,
down.
right?
No, I think he put himself
I think he did that.
Yeah, it's his.
You know, I once had sex on a fucking cemetery, and people said I was disrespectful.
That's, oh, fuck them, man.
I mean, if I was dead and laying on a fucking cemetery, I would be happy if someone fucked over
Exactly.
me.
Like, you looking at somebody's ass from your coffin.
Yeah.
Like, that's like a, yeah.
Because Algeria was a socialist, fundamentalist Islamic country, and that's no parallel. No, I know. Communism and Islamic fundamentalism. Right. I was able to escape. I spent some time in Switzerland, and I was captured by the DEA.
Where, in Switzerland?
No, in Afghanistan, at the airport, and brought back, and I did about 3.5 years. Altogether, I did 4.5 years in prison for the possession of 2 roaches of marijuana.
4.5 years. So it really turned your life around, didn't it? A professor at Harvard and running, escaping. What did you do 4.5 years in prison? Timothy Leary, what did Timothy Leary actually thought about? What did
Well, I
you
tell you, I used that time wisely. I enjoyed it. I'm not
Did you enjoy it?
I'm not advocating prison, boys and girls, but I found it interesting and an education experience. You can be a psychologist and the very bottom of the prison system. That's what was getting really angry. They put me at the bottom, and I got a view of society. You know, when you're down at the bottom, you really see how the police state operates. Also, I love prison because I didn't have to pay the rent. I didn't have to answer the telephone. I didn't have to produce erections, on a regular basis. Just a joy.
Right.
And when I was a solitary confinement, I liked that best because, you know why? Why? My roommate was a very funny guy. I can't entertain all the time.
Was he?
Yeah.
Is he still there or is he out now?
That's me.
Your roommate. Oh, you do. I see you. Okay, joke. I know. You're a funny man. You know that? You're actually doing the stand-up comedy too.
No, I don't do stand-up.
Well,
I give my college lecture, but I give it...
it's comedy. In comedy. No?
I make fun of authority. I make fun of...
No, that's comedy. That's fun.
Yes, but I'm not a stand-up.
No, I meant
I don't tell big jokes.
No, we understand that.
Can I take that on this book?
Yes, of course you can. intelligent people, I know. People with minds who want to be their own person. But what's something
Well, people like you, not like me, are those people who are deeply committed to religious orthodoxy or to a fundamentalist cause.
right?
Open-minded people like me. Troublemakers, bohemians, artists.
Would you consider yourself a bohemian?
Well, that's one phrase.
Well-
Maybe I'm a beatnik. I'm a bohemian.
Well,
I'm
that's-
basically an outsider. I'm a dissenting philosopher, and there's always a good market for a good audience because basically a lot of people out there want to be turned on and want to learn how to operate the brain.
What's been the biggest lesson?
Well, it's kind of foolish to be. I don't pretend to be a wise person. No, I don't. I have raised questions. I don't give answers. That's a subject. So, but I will give you an answer. You're playing the ping pong game of an interview. You see, the best tip I can give anyone, if you want to grow and learn how to become smarter, enjoy life more, and remain young, hang out with people that are smarter than you are. Teach you something about your mind and your brain.
Good morning.
Was a philosopher named Socrates, and I based my entire life on Socrates.
So that's where Timothy Leary.
He's the guy that caused all the trouble for me. His motto was, he said that the aim of human life, Tippy, was to know thyself. And this was very subversive, because the very idea of someone saying, you don't have a self, you're a serf, you're a slave, he was inventing the idea of individuality, and that you could do something about your life. Now, as soon as I studied the books about Socrates, I realized
Monkey boy!
it was a dangerous profession, because you're teaching people to
get into
question
themselves.
authority. I realized that this job, which I was going to undertake, the corrupting of the minds of youth, it paid poorly. It could get you in serious difficulty with the authorities. In the case of Socrates, it got him hemlocked. But I've enjoyed this profession, and in the last 70 years in America, it's been a wonderful time.
It has.
For a dissident philosopher, because so much change has happened that.
Do you think the kids today know thyself? So a lot of them don't have identifications of their own self. They don't know who they are. They just follow the leaders.
And it's been that way.
Am I right?
It's been that way for most human beings throughout most human history.
Right.
At certain times in human history, culture, when everything's favorable, we have what's called a renaissance. Now, they had one in Athens, because Athens was protected by geography from the big empires.
Right.
There's another great renaissance in around Venice and northern Italy. And a renaissance preaches the basic religion of humanism.
Right.
Renaissance period, we had one in the 60s here, and the key to it was humanism. It's that the aim of individual life is to know yourself and to treat each other as human beings. And this flies in direct opposition to every fundamentalist religion, to every political party where you're supposed to work for God or for the state. So, and what happens in a Renaissance, we rediscover the wonderful potential of the inner human being.
Right.
It becomes, the clothes tend to come off because there's more human contact, and beauty and erotic activity tends to be more active at this period. So in the 60s we had a classic Renaissance, which ended in 1980 when the repression of Reagan and Bush came out. We all know that's my
Right. Berkeley. Went to Berkeley.
I went there for 4 years and I taught.
And you taught?
For about 4 years at Berkeley, yeah.
Philosophy.
Psychology.
But that's really philosophy too, isn't it? Really?
Yes.
Psychology, philosophy.
Yeah,
you know,
of course,
to be a good psychiatrist or, go ahead.
I agree with you, Skippy.
So what do you think? You were there in the 60s, or was it the 60s you were there? When were you there?
No, I was a graduate student at Berkeley from 1940s.
40s? Really?
To 50.
Okay.
And I taught around Berkeley and did research there as a faculty member and a researcher for about 9 years. I left Berkeley basically to go to Harvard in 1959.
You went to Harvard. For how long?
As a teacher. As a faculty member.
Faculty. When did this all begin for Timothy Leary? This creating of LSD. When did all that started?
Well, I didn't create LSD.
Well, you did something about it. They all
Yes,
think
I
you
did.
are the creator, but you're not. I know you're not. Experiment.
I don't know anything about chemistry at all.
Yeah, but
I'm now involved in computers, and I can hardly turn my own computer on. I try to use these tools as ways of increasing intelligence and getting to operate your mind and your brain. To be intelligent, to know thyself, you have to learn how to operate your mind and your brain. And there's
we don't use it enough. People use it just this much.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there. Tell me more about that.
Well, of course, most schools do not teach young people to think for themselves. The idea is most schools indoctrinate to train you to play your part in a factory society, or you're going to be a lawyer and you'll be a doctor, and you got to be a crook, because the cops, we have to have cops and crooks. So there are all these roles that are being taught in schools. But rarely, there are a lot of good teachers out there, and I'm sure...
Are there really, Timothy?
There are many teachers out there, particularly now, people that went through the 60s, when thinking for yourself was popular and almost authorized.
Yes.
There are a lot of good teachers out there that are doing their best to encourage and stimulate their students to think for themselves. But there's 60s kids that are now...
That's what I have always thought for myself ever since I was a kid.
That's why I like
an individual. I'm me.
There ain't nobody like Skippy Webb.
No, but I'm just saying, Timothy, I've always been me.
That's why I've always liked you, Skippy.
Did you? Is that right? So tell me more about the LSD. What happened there? You started something there with that creation. A lot of pot and everything else.
I didn't start anything. The use of certain botanical, vegetable substances was psychotropic to activate the brain. That's been going on for thousands of years.
It has been.
Socrates and that whole group of Plato and the Eleusinian mysteries, they were using marijuana, hashish, and opium. The use of drugs or vegetables to activate your brain, to open up new circuits of your brain, that's called shamanism. And many say that most of the religions and much of the philosophy has come from groups. Like the group around Socrates.
Socrates, yes.
At Harvard University, for example, there's been a long tradition, ongoing tradition,
really,
of the use of psychedelic drugs.
At Harvard?
Ralph Waldo Emerson started what was called American Transcendentalism. We're flying in the face of the Puritan ethic in Boston. Emerson was banned from Harvard and Boston for about 30 years, longer than I was.
Really?
Yeah, and then at the same time, there was an active use of psychoactive drugs by British poets. Then William James, who founded the psychology department at Harvard, wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience, in which he talked about his experiences with hashish and nitrous oxide.
Right.
So when I went there, I was joining a long club of honorable and very distinguished philosophers who believed in transcendence, or basically they were humanists, as opposed to the engineered tradition of MIT or the puritanical fundamentalist tradition of Christianity.
Right. But in 1970, 5 years, they gave you 5 years in prison for a little abuse of marijuana. Is it just a little marijuana? 5 years. Well, they said you for
it was more than 5.
It was?
I was sentenced to both federal and state prison for could have totaled 30 years.
30, but you didn't spend 30 years.
Well, I escaped after 9 months.
You did?
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know. What do you mean you escaped?
I trained very carefully, and I climbed a wire and climbed a wall, and I was met by a guerrilla outlaw group, and I got political asylum in Algeria, and...
How long were you in Algeria?
About 9 months. I was there with the Black Panthers, and then I went to...
With the Black Panthers?
You haven't read my book, have you?
Not really, no, I haven't. Not your book.
I've written several unauthorized autobiographies.
Right. I'm not too familiar with your book.
Yeah, so I got one called Flashbacks. You can get it in the bookstores right now. It's got the whole story there, and that's being made into a movie now by Interscope. A brilliant young man named Bima Stagg, who's writing a script about my life.
So tell me more about being with the Black Panther in Algeria, and then from there you went to, you went back to prison? Did you go back to prison?
I had to escape from, actually, Algeria, because Algeria was a socialist, fundamentalist Islamic country, and that's no parallel laughs.
No, I know it is.
Communism and Islamic fundamentalism.
Right.
I looking had to escape. I spent some time in Switzerland, and then I was captured by the DEA.
Where, in Switzerland?
No, in Afghanistan, at the airport, and brought back, and I did about 3.5. Altogether, I did 4.5 years in prison for the possession of 2 roaches of marijuana.
4.5 years. So it really turned your life around, didn't it? From a professor in Harvard and running, escaping. What did you do for 4.5 years in prison? Timothy Leary. What did Timothy Leary actually thought about? What did
Well,
you do?
I tell you, I used that time wisely. I enjoyed it. I'm not advocating.
Did you enjoy it?
I'm not advocating prison, boys and girls, but I found it interesting and an educational experience for me to be a psychologist at the very bottom of the prison system, because that's when I escaped. They were really angry at me. They put me at the bottom, and I got a view of society. You know, when you get down at the bottom, you really see how the police state operates. Also, I love being in prison because I didn't have to pay the rent. I didn't have to answer the telephone. I didn't have to produce erections, on a regular basis. It's just a joke.
Right, I know.
And when I was in solitary confinement, I liked that best because, you know why?
Why?
My roommate was a very funny guy, kept me entertained all the time.
Was he?
Yeah.
Is he still there, or is he out now?
That's me, my
Your roommate. Oh, you do. I see you. Okay, joke. I know.
Joke.
Here. You're a funny man. You know that?
Thank you.
You're actually doing a stand-up comedy too, kind
No,
of a
I don't
thing.
do stand-up.
Well,
I give my college lecture, but I give it...
in comedy. In comedy flair.
No? I make fun of authority. I make fun of... I'm very
No,
aggressive.
that's comedy. That's fun.
Yes, but I'm not a stand-up.
No, I meant,
I don't tell dick jokes,
No, we
Can I
understand that.
Can I say dick on this program?
Yes, of course you can, but
No, I
Timothy,
don't-
I understand that.
Yeah, I don't do that kind of stand-up. I try to mercilessly make fun of Christianity and Islam and politicians. So that's just part of my job as a dissident philosopher.
What happened after you got out of prison, the day you arrived out of prison? First of all, what prison were you in? Which one?
I was in 49 jails and prisons in four continents, so
Really?
around a lot, yeah.
They
I
really
came
moved
after
on.
my release. I was released from California when Jerry Brown became governor, and I was released from federal prison.
Freak off!
After Reagan was thrown out. Right. I'm sorry, Nixon.
Did he has caused me to have
I came to Hollywood, and I've been involved
Tourette's.
in communication
freak off?
and computers and electronics and.
Immediately, is this what ran through your mind in jail? Were you preparing for this when you got out? Computers?
Yes, I'm a great follower of a man named Marshall McLuhan, who wrote those wonderful books about communication. And he said that if you want to change a culture, if you want to change yourself, if you want to change religion, change the medium, the mode of communication. And he said that Gutenberg created Protestantism when he had the mass assemble book that everybody could read. And now the new form of communication is electronic. So I'm a fanatic about electronics. My brain...
Electronic brain, you're doing. Aren't you in electronic brains experiments right now you're into?
That's right, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, maybe we should... I don't give lectures anymore, and
Okay.
The next two Monday nights at EZTV.
EZT on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Santa Monica Boulevard, right?
I know it.
La
Yes, off of La Cienega, right.
And that's in Santa Monica Boulevard between La Cienega and San Vicente.
That's in West Hollywood.
We're having a wonderful time because we're each Monday night we invite geniuses, wizards in this new field of electronic multimedia. And we're learning how to produce trance states by using computer-generated images and electronic patterns. Matter of fact, why don't we put on this little tape now?
You have a tape right now. You
This is a commercial, like a commercial you see on TV, and we're at the message from the product.
Right.
The message from the sponsor is learn how to use your eyeballs and operate your brain. So let's run the tape.
Use your eyeballs.
Yeah. Learn how to use your eyeballs. Yeah.
Interesting. Let's see it. What is that about?
See, the eye, that's when in a dark room, this could, indeed, when we do it in a dark room at EZTV, it's right. A mild trance state. And then my voice comes over it, and I'm saying, the eyes are the windows of your brain. Who controls your eyes, controls and programs your brain. Right. And all eyes must be illuminated. Eyes love dazzle. Eyes love diamonds. Glitter. Eyes today, brains love electrons. Who controls your screen? Controls your brain. We're developing methods for the individual, a kid in the third world, or a kid in the inner city school, learns how to control what's on her screen. Operate your brain. Program your own brain. Use the methods of modern advertising, trailers and commercials to put your own message on the brain. Otherwise, you'll be programmed by the wizards who control commercials on your television set.
Who's relaxing when people see this?
Well, we'll kind of jumble you and scramble your brain. So you're basically, my brain, most brains love to jumble with electrons.
Do they really?
Oh, sure. Just a moment.
Stimulate them? Or is that stimulation?
There's been a rumor for centuries that some guy, tough male macho, dazzle the diamond in some young girl's eyes.
Right.
She'll wash his socks forever. The diamonds are girls' best friend.
Excellent.
Wrong. Diamonds give power to those people who know how to use them. And now electrons. So we're teaching people, we're developing new computer programs, running off CD-ROM, running off Nintendo.
Where did you get this idea from?
It's all out there. It's all
It is out there? But
These are not my ideas.
what sort of persons attract to Timothy Leary? What sort of person attracts? Intelligent people, I know. People with minds and want to be their own person. But what sort of person?
Well, people, I can tell you, people who do not like me are those people who are deeply committed to a religious orthodoxy or to a fundamentalist cause.
Right.
Open-minded people like me. People that, troublemakers, bohemians, artists.
Would you consider yourself a bohemian?
Well, it's one phrase. I'm
Well-
a hippie, I'm a beatnik, I'm a bohemian. I'm
Well,
basically an outsider. I'm a dissenting philosopher, and there's always a good market for a good audience because basically a lot of people out there want to be turned on and want to learn how to operate their brain.
Has been the biggest lesson for Timothy Leary in your life?
Well, it's kind of foolish to be, I don't pretend to be a wise person. I raise questions. I don't give answers. That's what Socrates told me.
Right.
But I will give you an answer here. We're playing the ping pong game of an interview.
Right.
Let me see. The best tip I could give anyone, if you want to grow and learn how to become...
It's all part of an MK Ultra training regimen for scat enthusiasts and booty hole lovers. Lovey daddy!
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm actually listening to a 1992 interview of Timothy Leary, and this was at the advent of computers and Nintendo, and he was already hypothesizing that you would be able to reprogram yourself using new mediums of, multimedia and creativity, saying that screens and electrons, we can reprogram our brains, change our culture, change our environment, change ourselves, and MK Ultra is now. You can MK Ultra yourself. I'm 100% sure that anyone can actually radically change their personality and their identity. Yeah, for the better. But you got to go to a freak off though if you really want it to work. So call me at 312-498-0517 and you can come to my freak off. It's totally legal. And we got the baby oil, we got the baby wipes, we got the dildos, we got the butt plugs. Just give me a call, give me a holler. It's better than Diddy's freak offs. And don't worry, we got Justin Bieber posters up on the wall for you ladies.
Oh, God.
Smarter, enjoy life more, and remain young. Hang out with people that are smarter than you are, and they can teach you something about your mind and your brain. And I'm proud to say that I hang out, my friends, every week. When I look at my calendar, my appointment book, and I see the people that I hang out with.
Who sort of some of the people? Come on.
Well, Sunday, for example, at my house in Beverly Hills, I had a turkey roast. I didn't do anything about the turkey. For 70 members of Alcor. Alcor is an organization who believe that people that are going to have their bodies or their brains frozen. You heard about
Of course.
I'm a member of...
I might be one of them. Go ahead.
We had 65 or 70 people in my home. We plan to meet each other maybe in 20 or 30 or 40 years. because we're going to be brought back.
Is that the tag?
Yeah, that's the tag. That tells doctors, do not autopsy me, send me, freeze me.
Really?
It says freeze the autopsy. To give an example, now these people, these 60 people, by definition, they think for themselves, right?
Right.
They're
I like that.
They're mavericks,
Yeah.
and they're smart because you got to be smart. You have to understand the physics and the biology and the memory. So they're smart people. Monday nights every Monday night I go to Easy TV, and we're assembling Easy TV.
What do you mean by assembly? You gather people around?
People come in, they buy a
They
ticket,
pay.
and they come in. But we're
And you talk to
assembling
them and all
crew.
that? Yeah.
For example, there's a play called Timothy and Charlie. It's about me and Charlie Manson. It was written by Tim Reel, and they do incredible audio visuals. So they perform. What we're doing, Skippy, is we're merging at Easy TV every Monday night.
Right.
The power of electrons to create an environment, and then out of the environment, the lecturer comes, or the actors in the play suddenly jump out of the screen-like environment. We're developing experiments in what's called virtual reality.
Right.
And these young people, I'm the luckiest, really, the man in the world. Every week I meet new people that are on that frontier of electronic communication and consciousness expansion and intelligence increase.
What's been the hardest for Timothy Leary? What's been the hardest for you?
Well, I suffer, as we all do, about incredible poverty and hunger and violence and military power. I mean, just when you read now, the Hindus are fighting the Muslims,
Right.
and the Catholics are fighting the Protestants in Belfast. The stupidity and the ignorance and the control of the military and the religious people, that pains me very much, and as I think it does most of us out there.
You're very concerned, aren't you, Timothy? You've been concerned. I'm looking at you right now. You're very concerned what's out there. But are we doing the right thing right now with our military forces?
Who's we?
Well, the military force is
keep me
going
out of
to,
that, yeah.
you don't want to be in that. Okay, military force, the Americas. Are we doing the right thing to I know we should help them. It's a terrible thing.
See, I'm not an expert on that, but basically, I think I don't like the idea of having military people doing that because it's
Right,
glorifying
absolutely,
military.
absolutely.
And anything that glorifies the military, you're going to pay for that.
Right.
You're going to pay for that in your budget. You're going to pay for that in bloodshed. So I've been to West Point. Skippy, I was actually born at
Were
West
you
Point.
in really
My
West
father
Point?
was an Army officer. I was born at West Point.
Is that one of the schools you got kicked out of?
And I got kicked out of. No, I actually resigned from.
You
West
resigned?
Point. I know the military mind very well, and the military mind is not to be trusted.
I do too. I used to entertain 10, 15 years of my life all over on the world.
Yeah.
Vietnam and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the military.
Yeah.
And I don't agree us
Yeah.
military being there.
Hardliners, the hardliners
They
in
are.
America, and the hardliners in Russia, and the hardliners in Somalia, they all want to
Uh-huh.
take our wealth and use it on weapons. So
Some of your books. Tell me some of your books. And I have not read. I got to be honest with you. How many books have you got out?
it's about 30, 35.
35?
Yeah.
Really? What's the most popular of Timothy Leary?
Flashbacks.
The Mirror? Flashback?
Flashbacks.
How about The Mirror? The Mirror.
Mind Mirror was a computer game.
Tell me about the Mind Mirror.
Well, I've been working for the last 10 years on programs that allow the person to turn the computer screen into like a mind phone.
Right.
And to put your thoughts there. 5 or 6 years ago, you could only do this with words, alphanumerics, but now you can use CD-ROM and graphics. So these new image processors and computers are tools
Right.
to learn how to operate your brain and how to communicate more clearly and become smarter.
Timothy Leary, married? You have
At the
children?
present time, I've been married 7.5 times.
7.5
7 and
times.
3/4
You
times. I have an addiction problem, Skippy. I'm addicted to marriage. I'm addicted to marriage. I just
Are you
love
really?
being married.
Okay, you
Like
and Mickey
any-
Rooney. Mickey Rooney did too.
Yeah, and the first 2 or 3, 4 years is wonderful, but then you realize that you're dependent on it, and that and then I have. I'm proud to say that I have been lucky enough to have as a living companion some of the smartest, most beautiful women in the world, and every good thing that has come from me I owe to my
Barbara. Her name is Barbara?
Barbara.
Yeah, I met her in Rome years ago. She used to live in Rome.
She was an actress and a model there, yeah.
She was.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
right,
know
yeah.
that at the time, but beautiful lady. Very
And
bright.
very intelligent, yeah, and elegant.
You like to be around intelligent, brilliant people. Do you ever be around dumb people sometimes, Timothy? Don't look at me now. Have you ever been around people?
Well,
How
all
do you
around.
handle that? How do you-
Yes. I try to leave a trail of fun and joy. You know, we all, as we go through life, you meet a lot of people that
Right.
are not necessarily brain surgeons. But I try in any interaction to leave a little trail of sunshine or, a little joke or something because I basically believe in humanity.
Yes.
I believe in the human potential, and my life is about awakening or encouraging people to develop their potential. And it's a
Do you write all night, Timothy, at night? It
I tend
seems
to be
like you're a writer.
I'm a late night person.
Yeah, it seems like it to me. Because I think you read a lot. You read a
Less
lot.
and less.
Everything?
I don't read books as much anymore. I read magazines and I do a lot of computer stuff.
Is that important for us to know what's out there in the world today? Or sometimes it confuses me when I turn the TV on and listen to the news. It's upsetting.
It's sad.
It's sad. I can't sleep at night sometimes. That's why I don't want to listen to the news late night. How do we handle that? How do we handle that?
Well, see, when people ask me questions like that, my answer is think for yourself.
Okay.
Figure it out yourself. Think for yourself. Because
I
each
don't want to
person
listen to
is
it.
different.
Oh, I see.
And you have to experiment with yourself and listen to other people's ideas, but you have to do it yourself. I said, think for yourself.
Timothy Leary, what makes Timothy Leary happy? What does he? Are you a happy person?
I think I'm one of the happiest people who've ever lived.
Really?
Yes.
Even throughout this whole... Do you have any
One of the
regrets in your
happiest
life?
people have ever lived.
Yes, that's a logical question. I regret the fact that I moved around so much and being in prison and being so controversial. It was very hard on my children. It was very hard on one of my marriages because at one point Richard Nixon called me the most dangerous man in America, and I was being stopped and chased by the police everywhere I went. They were just. Well, my basic crime was I was abusing the First Amendment by talking too much.
I know, I understand.
But
They don't like us to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
When they start, we think for ourselves, we're dangerous.
It was very hard to answer your question on my children to have their father, such a hated person. My son, when he went to high school, was actually beat up by other kids because he was my son.
Yes.
And this takes a tremendous, of course, still I'm a middle-class American, so it's not as bad as it is for most children in the world, but still I regret that my kind of life was hard on people that were closest to me. Because family and friendship are basic things.
How is he handling it today, your son?
They're doing fine. They're doing fine.
They're going to school?
I've got 5 grandchildren, and I'm in
Really?
touch with them all the time, and they go up and down. And there's not as much enmity. As a matter of fact, people are not, the government isn't going around, chasing me now, I hope.
Yeah.
But things are...
Is Timothy
it's going to be
Leary...
it's going to be a great 1990s. I'll tell you a story that was told to me. It's a time to rejoice because when you think about it, a lot of bad things happening. We have a president,
Right.
a vice president, and 2 dynamic, strong first ladies,
Right.
all of whom are younger than old farts like Bob Dylan and Mick Jagger. Isn't that something? It's all new young generation.
Isn't it great?
Which is post-World War II, and it's the 60s kids, and
So you like that?
I don't, I'm not claiming that Clinton's going to be a great politician, because it's a hopeless job, but
Right.
the spirit of hope that Clinton and Bush, and there's all around the world, there's
You
a
sense
sense
that. I do too.
of, Kennedy, when Kennedy was elected in the 60s, he gave us hope too. Actually, Kennedy was not a very good president.
Yes.
But still, the fact he was young and jacky, and he gave us a sense
Right.
of hope and vigor and courage. And
He might bring Dylan to the White House to play for him. I like Dylan. Don't you like Dylan? Bob Dylan.
Jimmy
I know.
Carter did that.
Yeah.
The rumor is that they might bring the Grateful Dead. No, they're not going to bring Dylan, I don't think.
No. Tell me about Timothy Leary's book and life story and movies. What's going to happen? Are they going to be doing that? Tommy Delivery?
I don't know.
Who would you like to see do your life
That's
story?
kind of
Kathy?
almost like it. I don't
You don't
think
like
about it. I don't think about that.
Wickerman Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, our topic of discussion tonight is the world of LSD. Our guest is Dr. Timothy Leary, founder of the modern psychedelic movement. Our student guests are from Queens College. Mr. Buckley, will you proceed?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Timothy Leary is the Pope of what he chooses to call a new religion, which is based on the consumption of drugs, particularly at the moment LSD, whose attractions are said to be sweeping the campuses, and after whose initials Dr. Leary has named his new religion, the League for Spiritual Discovery. Dr. Leary really is a doctor of clinical psychology. He went to school in Alabama and took a PhD in Berkeley, and after experiencing nirvana in Spain, went to Harvard, where he was in due course fired. Now, it is not easy to be fired from Harvard, at least not for misbehavior. But it transpired that Dr. Leary had become tour director for a lot of his students whom he was sending on long-distance trips through the mists of psychedelic experience. Dr. Leary then went to Millbrook, New York, which has served as the headquarters of this movement, but he has traveled widely and is used to receiving standing ovations as he advances the position that, as someone observed, that opiates are the religion of the people. I should like to ask Dr. Leary, why is it so generally recognized that well-adjusted people tend to LSD and other drugs more so than less, or rather less so than well-adjusted people?
Would you repeat the question?
Yeah. Why is it that it is a common impression that poorly adjusted people tend in greater numbers to the world of LSD than normally adjusted people?
Well, I've never heard that suggested before. The people who are using marijuana,
Then you're badly adjusted.
Today tend to be the highly educated. They come from our so-called best colleges. There's no LSD or marijuana problem down in Podunk Junior College in Arkansas. It's at Harvard, Princeton, and even at Yale, that 50 to 70% of the undergraduates are seriously experimenting with the most important thing that can be experimented with, their own consciousness.
Are you confusing adjustment with education?
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Why did you mention the difference between Podunk U and Yale University? What makes you think they're better adjusted at Yale than at Podunk U? You hadn't thought about it. Nobody told you about it.
No, I'm trying to see what your problem is, and I think I've diagnosed it.
Go ahead, Doc.
Your approach to the word drug, I think, is that of many Americans, particularly over the age of 50. When the word drug is mentioned, think of some opiate, something that is an escape, something that takes you away from reality, something that you take if you're a failure. All of the statistics that I've seen indicate that the people who use psychedelic drugs are people who are pretty well adjusted by any standard or criterion you want to name. Income, education, creativity, productivity, and they want more because what psychedelic drugs produce is not the dull, glazed, free martini haze. Psychedelic drugs intensify consciousness. They're microscopic in their effect, and they're used by people who are looking for more.
Well, they may be used by people who are looking for more, but they are also used by people who seem to feel incompetent to use natural experience as a means of getting more. Isn't that the case?
A fascinating discussion in progress and in store on Firing Line. We'll continue in a moment.
You were saying, Dr. Leary?
I was attempting to answer your question about who is using psychedelic drugs. Of course, this is like asking how many virgins are there at Vassar and who are they? there's no way of getting an accurate statistic as to how many and what percentage of the population are experimenting with consciousness. But it's happening. It's happening in larger numbers. And from my observations, it tends to be young people, the creative minority, and the socially alienated minority groups in the United States, particularly the American Indian, the Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and so on.
Oh, I don't doubt it's happening any more than I doubt that nervous breakdowns are happening. I'm simply interested in trying to confirm an impression, and that impression is that not that the world is divided into two groups, but that by and large you can identify people who symbolize two different groups. There is that one group which, to use the conventional vocabulary of clinical psychology, is well adjusted in the sense of being able to cope with reality. There is that other group that can't cope with reality in none of the circumstances, whether out of adventurism, or whether out of intrigue, or whether out of hopelessness, tends this year to look to LSD, last year to cocaine, the year before that to alcohol, and day after tomorrow, as you have pointed out, to something else. Now, are we entitled to infer anything from this fact? For instance, take people that, by all accounts, are considered pretty normal. Oh, Harry Truman. Could you imagine Harry Truman taking a trip?
No. I'll give you the...
Did you mean that to be an anti-Truman observation?
Not at all. Drop out of politics, young people. The one sociological or psychological characteristic of the Psyduck movement
Massey, can you please use chat?
As a matter of fact, I think that the
documents to vote on.
only important political issue in the United States today, the division, is how old are you? I think that people under the age of 30 come from a entirely different way of life. I think that they're mutants.
Well, they're younger, yeah.
No, they've been brought up in a world, Bill, which is entirely different from the one that you and I knew. It's already gone beyond my comprehension. The kids today are into electronics. They're into experiments in consciousness. They're into a level of awareness which I can dimly grasp, but can only, as it passes me by, take off my hat and say, Godspeed to.
Yeah, well, I say Godspeed to them too, without necessarily handing them pot in the same gesture. But
nobody's handing the kids today anything. They are finding what they need. They're using what makes sense.
Manifestly, they are not.
Well, I think they are.
At least not the noisiest of them. The noisiest of them are making a great deal of noise precisely because they feel necessary to express either their refusal to come to terms with the world or their psychological incapacity to do so. I'm very much in sympathy with them. I think it's extremely hard to come to terms with the world that liberalism built. But at the same time, I
agree with you there.
The kind of disengagement that you have. Well, one of the things that fascinates me about you, and there are a lot of things that do, is your use of language. There's a sort of a 19th century tushery. There's sort of a mysticism in there that causes you to write sentences like this when you describe dropping out, which you can't ever do. Dropping out, you say, means to detach yourself harmoniously, tenderly, and gracefully from worldly commitments until your entire life is dedicated to worship and search. Now, to the extent that I can understand English, and I have a hard time sometimes, doesn't that really mean that you should abandon a commitment to your family, abandon a commitment to your church, to your country, to supra-personal ideals? And isn't this really a retreat into yourself and a failure to come to grips with the fact that the world exists other than merely of yourself?
No, because what you diagnose as the world is actually the fake prop television studio of New York City and the United States today. The motto of our religion is turn on, tune in, and drop out. Now, this happens to be the oldest message which has been passed on by spiritual teachers and spiritual searchers for thousands of years. You've got to detach yourself from the situation. Our country was founded on exactly that motto. Sorry, George III, we're dropping out. The Roman Empire fell, as the American Empire will fall in the near future, from exactly the same motive. People turning within and then coming back to found their spiritual and their political and their economic life, not on the IBM mass assembly line society, but on the family and the tribe. I mentioned to you earlier, Bill, in the dressing room that I consider myself to be much more conservative than you. At Millbrook, New York, and in hundreds of similar places in the United States today, psychedelic people are leaving the 20th century, leaving this fake prop television studio, and we're going back to exactly the values which have been fragmented and destroyed by American society. We're going back to the family. We teach our kids. We give our kids psychedelic sacraments like marijuana and LSD, just the way you would perhaps send. Well, as a matter of fact, there's nothing that's more old-fashioned than a parent worshiping with his child and sharing in the shrine of the home the deep spiritual moments of life. Now, your idea, and perhaps the idea of many of your viewers, is that psychedelic chemicals are like heroin, or perhaps like a super alcohol, that you get drunk, or that you lose touch with reality. Of course, this is the myth which we try very hard to overcome, that like it or not, believe it or not, the LSD experience is a philosophic and a religious experience.
Well,
and it does need you, as any religious experience has in the past, to detach yourself, not from the family, or not from your ideals, but from the fake prop society, and go back.
Sure, that can be said of suicide, too. As a matter of fact, that can be said of any, a number of drugs. And let's go ahead and agree that LSD seems to be, in some particulars, different from other opiates or drugs or chemicals. I think that's the word you prefer to use. At the same time, agreeing that LSD is a departure from the normal world, and that under the circumstances, people who accept its influence.
But what do you mean by normal world? You mean Harry Truman? Is that normal?
Well,
you mean Democrat, Republican? Is that normal? Do you mean this sort of television studio? This is highly unnormal to me and to thousands of people like me who are leaving the cities. We're going back. Yes.
Yeah. Well, assuming that you accept the existence of existential reality, that is to say, assuming that you are not a solipsist who believes that all of the world is yourself and your particular projections, then I say that there is a natural order. People who have eyes can see it, people who have noses can smell it, and people who have ears can hear it. And that's the kind of world I am talking about. And it seems to me that people who are willing to take LSD, even in spite of the fact that doctors are united in their judgment, that to do so is to take a drug whose consequences are not simply uncharted. You can go to Bellevue tonight, as you know, and find people who took a trip, and the consequences of that we will not know for years, perhaps, certainly. These people are driven out of a sense of desperation to find something new, precisely because they can't cope with what is.
But
now, a certain amount of escapism is perfectly natural.
Granted, in a social movement in which you have hundreds of thousands or millions of people taking LSD every few months, granted, a few of these people take it out of a sense of desperation, out of a sense of failure in life. But I suspect that the percentage of these people is surprisingly small. Everyone who is listening to my words right now knows something about what LSD does. It really brings you down to where you're at. It's a relentless microscope. It's a spotlight on all of your egocentricities and all of your deceits. I suspect that most people don't take LSD because they're afraid to, because they don't want to face this rather brutal confrontation.
Quite rightly, they should be afraid of you.
I've never advocated the use of LSD.
You haven't?
I'm not advocating it now. I'm warning people that psychedelic chemicals, of which LSD is the current, but we already have new ones coming along, is a powerful trip. It will show you things about yourself and about the divine process that you and your mind have been protected from.
But you're careful to say you don't urge it, because I gather it's against the law or something like that, but you did say somewhere that you figured 20 years from now, half of the members of the Supreme Court would be smoking pot.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I think they probably have been already. They can account for some of those decisions. But really, I think that you're level with us and say if the law permitted you to recommend the use of LSD, you would. Isn't that correct?
No. There's no law against
Dr. Timothy Leary is the guest on tonight's edition of Firing Line. Our host is William F. Buckley, Jr., and we'll continue in a moment.
You are aware, Dr. Leary, that 50 or 60 years ago, young Sigmund Freud was very much taken with the uses of cocaine and advised his wife to use it and wrote a considerable treatise on it, only to find out that subsequently that it was addictive and that he went through an experience which might not end up being so dissimilar from your own. That is to say, let's look forward to the possibility that 2 years from now you, with the acute conscience, would be willing to re-enter those worldly commitments and advise people that they have made a mistake by taking indiscriminately a drug as dangerous as LSD.
Well, I've never urged anyone to take LSD, and what we have been doing for several years, Bill, in all of our publications and lectures, is warning people about this power. People seem to think that we invented LSD. We didn't, God made LSD. The divine process, the evolutionary sequence over billions of years has produced the plants and the vegetables and the molecules, which we now call psychedelic. Nor do we tell people to drop out of life or drop out of familial responsibility. But we tell everyone that wants to listen to us, drop out of American society. We think American society is an insane anthill. And the human being has been living for, hundreds of thousands of years before we had any of the things we consider so necessary in American life today. You can actually live, you can make love, you can enjoy food, you can raise children without being a computerized, mechanized American.
Well, not exactly. Somebody's got to protect you so that you can do this. Without the American Marines, you wouldn't have much chance to make love, except maybe in Siberia.
One of our student guests has a question for you.
Good.
Dr. Leary, in your new religion, have you found God? And if so, what is he like?
Yes, I have found God. The LSD experience is a brutal confrontation with the divine process. I wouldn't say that I talk with God. That would be too arrogant. I say I have listened to God. Now, do you want me to describe what God is like? I can't do that for thousands of years. Yeah. For thousands of years, men in my position have been trying to describe the ineffable. I would use the words of St. Martin and say that I can't describe God to you, but I can tell you how to find him. And then you're going to have to stand there naked in front of the divine process with your little 20th century ego behind, and you're going to have to surrender to it, or you're going to be frightened and call for a doctor. But that's what the psychedelic experience is all about. That's what the visionary experience is all about. It's always been a matter of heaven or hell. It's always required trust, confidence. It always taxes and tests your spiritual assets. It shows you where you're at. And then you come back and you define God the best you can. That's why we have a psychedelic art today. The new rock and roll beats, the new psychedelic design is, I think, Bill, a symptom of the fact that this new religion has a certain validity. I think that the new confrontation with God always produces a new form of art. Now, the new form of art, the new religious language in the future is going to be electronic. It's going to involve a vocabulary and instrumentation that is just as new to me as the printing press was when Gutenberg came along a few hundred years ago and said, hey,
do you know that you can turn on to God with a printed word? And I said, no, you can't do that. That must be against the law. Electronics is going to be the language of the theology of the future.
If I may say so, I think that's, and I say this with all due respect, utter, total gobbledygook.
Mr. Buckley?
It may be, well, let me comment on this, may I, Mr. Chairman? It may be that in the world of the future, we're going to be incapable of making sound distinctions. I don't doubt the possibility of that. It may be that we're heading for an Orwellian world in which IBM itself will assume some sort of metaphysical reality. But I say that if that happens, we will have lost whatever it is that makes civilization take any meaning at all. I don't think it's that easy to form new religions. Somebody once asked Voltaire how to found a new religion, and his answer was go out and get crucified and then rise again on the third day. It might suggest that even LSD would be incapable of accomplishing for you.
Mr. Buckley, we have a question for you from the student.
Aldous Huxley, who wrote a brilliant work called Brave New World, also wrote in The Doors of Perception that a man could use marijuana to open up such doors of perception. Why do you believe a man as brilliant and as prominent as Mr. Huxley would use such a thing as marijuana?
Because Mr. Huxley, A, was eccentric, as he would have been the first to acknowledge. B, everything that he went on to say and to talk about in the Brave New World was not by any means based on his use not of marijuana but of mescaline. C, the use of mescaline was the use of a drug whose potency is 1/500 the strength of LSD. So mescaline was just his snuff, you know. Mescaline was no more important to him than snuff was to Lord Chesterfield.
Bill, I'd like to ask you...
He happened to try to weave a mystique around it, which bores most people in due course. They read Brave New World not because of the fact that mescaline features in it, but simply because it's a brilliant job of improvisation.
I want to ask you a question. Our position in relationship to the law of Caesar today is that the human body is the first and last frontier of freedom. The people who follow the psychedelic religion are always in trouble with the law these days. And our position is that whatever moves out in the streets, behavior, property, weapons and so forth, Caesar's law holds here. And obey the law as far as overt behavior is concerned. But when it comes to your own body, what you put in your body, who you put in your body, what you do in the privacy of your own home to bring about changes in consciousness is your own business. And we reject the right of any medical or legislative body to tell us what to do with inside the sacred premise, the temple of God.
But my friend, you see, it's not that easy. As well as the fact that a few months ago you were screaming around the joint asking for a tax exemption for your new religion, which right away means that us all has got to pay for you all in order to wallow in your nirvana in Millbrook, New York. Plus
not
also,
you all, the people who believe in our religion are going to support us just the way Catholics support the Catholic Church. Now, come on.
Okay.
But I would not object.
Also, there are people in Bellevue Hospital
I would not object,
supported by the
Bill.
taxpayers who have taken LSD. I simply reject the absolute that a
No, I would say that there are fewer people
in a civilized society.
The facts of the matter are that there are fewer people in mental hospitals today than there were 5 or 10 years ago. Now, whatever's going on in this culture, psychologically, is keeping people out of mental hospitals. The facts of the matter are that there's a surprising low rate of casualties, considering the enormous number of people...
I'm not sure why you advance that highly interesting datum, i.e. in connection with what, but...
I think that's what's happening to the consciousness of American people is keeping them out of mental hospitals. But let's go back to this legal question, Bill, because I'm trying to strike a common ground here. I consider myself to be a very conservative person, highly orthodox in my defense of the individual.
Yes.
Now, not as far as money is concerned, not as far as property is concerned. There we'll take our chances with the rest. But when it comes to your own home and your own body, I think Caesar has no right entering.
You said that, yeah. And what I didn't have a chance to say was this. that in a civilized society, one acknowledges that what one does with one's body can very often have an effect on somebody else's body. For instance, to take the obvious case, if I have leprosy, let's say I'm quarantined, those who argue against permitting the propagandas, permitting people to proselytize the use of LSD, do so on grounds that I find extremely persuasive. Namely that if in fact you urge somebody to take LSD, when in fact you're urging them to take a drug, the consequences of which are considered to be medically unsafe, there's a sense in which you are an aggressor. Now, I agree with you. There oughtn't to be a law that says that you can't take LSD. But there ought, in my judgment, to be a law saying that you can't urge other people to take.
That's an interesting point, and I debate this with Dr. Lurie all the time. He says he doesn't care if I take LSD, he doesn't want me to talk about it. And I'm willing to give the federal government the right to put the label on the package. I agree that cyanide is dangerous. There should be a label on the package, warning, cyanide will cause a lethal stomachache. Cigarettes are dangerous. Warning, nicotine will cause lung cancer. On the package of marijuana, which will be legalized very soon, it should say, warning, marijuana will make you come to your senses. On the package of LSD, let them put any kind of warning they want. Warning, LSD will cause death and rebirth. I don't care. I'll let the doctors put the label, but they cannot put us in jail for possessing and using chemicals which change only our consciousness and our spiritual centeredness.
The topic, the world of LSD. The host, William F. Buckley Jr. The guest, Dr. Timothy Leary, from the program Firing Line. We'll continue.
I'm trying to get you to come out for the legalization of pot.
Dr. Leary, we have a question for you from a student.
Mr. Leary, before, in the beginning of the program, you sort of classified yourself as a sociological conservative and that you wanted stronger family ties and stronger family bonds. Now, don't you feel that LSD would be sort of a chemical crutch which would stifle the responsibility needed for caring for a family or for having the consciousness of perceiving the responsibility you need for a family?
Not at all. See, LSD expands consciousness and makes you more aware of what's really important in life. In our growing and very rudimentary utopian community at Millbrook, we believe in educating the children ourselves. We think that the children should take psychedelic drugs when they're old enough to know what's involved. We think that they should learn their professions the way men have always learned their professions, around the village, around the tribe, watching their father or their uncle or the guy next door. The idea that the average American will send his child away to school and turn the mind, the precious consciousness of his kid, over to a stranger that he doesn't know, that he probably wouldn't even have to his house for dinner. I consider this to be, like turning your child's mind over to drug pushers who hang around primary schools. The drugs they're pushing are symbols and the worst kind of robot values. We believe in educating our kids ourselves in our own community, and we would never think of urging anonymous impersonal education. You know, we assume, Bill, that America, with its educational system, has some kind of standard of norm. Actually, public education, as you well know, is a very recent modern innovation. I consider it to be a very unfortunate one.
Mr. Buckley?
We're doing our best to get away from it.
We have a question for you from a student.
Yes, Mr. Buckley. Marshall McLuhan has mentioned that the electronic media may have, in the long run, much of similar effects as the psychedelic drugs do, in affecting changes in consciousness on the populace as a whole, especially in reference to electronic tribalism and a new consciousness. I wonder if you'd react to this.
Yeah, react is exactly the right invitation. I think that it's quite true that that there are, well, the McLuhan thesis and the Leary thesis are tied together. They have pretty much identical metaphysical conceits. They seem to, both of them, to assume that there is a means of operating, a means of cognition, a means of knowing, a means of proceeding into the future that is divorced from the exercise of the intellect and the intellect and the moral intellect by conventional means. Now, again, I don't profess completely to understand Mr. McLuhan. And since every book by Mr. McLuhan is an explanation of his last book, I suspect that he shares my own difficulty. But I agree with your observation most emphatically that there is a relationship, in a sense, between the McLuhanite impatience and Dr. Leary's.
Mr. Buckley, let me ask you a question. Aren't you overlooking the fact that Dr. Leary is giving you arguments for some of your theories? You're opposed to to large-scale bureaucracy. You said that his followers didn't like the world that liberalism has built. Isn't he giving you an argument against liberalism there? You keep coming back to drugs.
No, he is, in the phrase of somebody, sending somebody to the guillotine is a cure for a case of dandruff. However bad the dandruff is, a complete retreat from reality is not, in my judgment, the way to handle it. If all of us who objected to liberalism were to think things were that easy, we'd simply pack up and go somewhere that's presumably a corner of the earth where it doesn't completely exist.
Yes, but that doesn't just show the...
That happened to be, though, Bill, how this country was formed. People just dropped out and moved on to form their new religious group, and that's exactly what we're urging today.
No, they didn't drop out.
Say to kids, drop out, start your new tribal thing French.
You know,
Dr. Leary, isn't that the way the Roman Empire fell, by people simply leaving the plantations, leaving the cities?
Let's be clear about that. The result of the psychedelic revolution is going to bring down the American Empire, not by violence, by love, as you saw at the Central Park Easter Sunday. We had 2,000 kids out in the streets cleaning the streets of Greenwich Village last week out of love, flowers. American Empire is going to fall, but it's not going to fall by violence or by force. I tell kids all the time, don't picket, don't protest. The left, the activist left, is very disturbed with me, as you probably know, Bill, because they rightly see that we are urging many of the anti-establishment young people to protest in the only effective way, a protest of loving passivity, a protest of familial turning on together, a protest of flowers and beauty.
Mr. Buckley, we have a question for you from a student.
Mr. Buckley, there seems to be some sort of discrepancy between your and Dr. Leary's feeling about the pathology of taking LSD. I was wondering if you or Dr. Leary could comment on that.
Well, I suppose I simply start by saying that I am not a doctor of clinical psychology, but neither am I party pre on the subject. I don't expect Mr. Camel to hit cigarettes, and I don't expect Mr. Leary to hit LSD. In point of fact,
Bill, I'm not talking about LSD.
People who defend its indiscriminate use are a tiny minority of the medical profession. In fact, I think you'd have to scrounge to find the name of a single person, unless he was somebody who had also been fired from Harvard University.
Dr. Leary, a student has a question for you.
Dr. Leary, I'm very confused by your term conscious expanding. Does this indicate an increased capacity of the mind to perceive in its conscious state or only while it's high? In other words, do you achieve an increased awareness and an ability to perceive things while you are in your normal state or only while you're home?
Psychedelic drugs are very much like the microscope or the telescope. You see, the microscope is psychedelic. It shows you something that is invisible to normal vision. And 400 or 500 years ago, if I went before an audience and I told...
I hate to interrupt, but I am part of the Shamrim Shabbos Goy detection system. Here to remind you, Yiddishkeit, that it is Shabbos, and the bridegroom is waiting for you, Rabboina.
normal, well-adjusted people, that there was a world around them of lawful beauty and predictability that you couldn't see with the naked eye, they'd probably send me up for more than 30 years. Then I say, look through this microscope, and indeed you see that there's another level of reality, another level of consciousness. Now then, when you take your eye away from the microscope, and you go back to the macroscopic world, then you have to start thinking about. You have to start describing. You have to start making observations. You have to build up a textbook of cellular cytology so that other people can take the microscope or can take LSD and check you out. Now, the science of taking LSD is just as replicable, just as repeatable, just as checkable as looking through a telescope or looking through a microscope. Only one eye can do it at a time. At the present time in the United States today, we've had hundreds of thousands of people who have looked through the microscope of LSD and come back and said, yes, there's something there which is of importance, of power, of philosophic and religious import that demands serious study and eventually demands that you change your life. Now, I've been studying the use of LSD in the United States for several years. Many people have started to use LSD and have quit because the demands were too great. The yoga of LSD is not an escape. It's not an easy way out. It's the toughest and the most arduous yoga of all, because you look through the microscope and then you come back to the level of reality. You try to change reality so that it fits your inner revelation. This happens to be...
Those microscopes, in the sense that you use them, have been around for a long time, as you said in another connection a moment ago.
Yes.
But incidentally, since the time that microscopes were discovered, I don't see that a lot of people spend their time looking into them. This is rather a job that has to be done, but preferably is not done by everybody at all. It's hardly an aesthetic experience to look through a microscope at, let's say, a cancer cell, is it?
I think...
You are watching the William Buckley program, and we'll continue in a moment.
Dr. Leary, one of the reasons why you confuse it seems to me that you use a terminology that sometimes is convenient for you to talk in terms of an ancient perspective. Sometimes seems to be convenient for you to talk in terms of your own particular chiliastic contributions as a newly arrived religious redeemer. But I don't quite understand two things, and I'm very anxious for you to discuss them before we quit. Number one, I do have to accuse you of a lack of candor. On the one hand, you say you never urge people to use LSD. On the other hand, you've sung here a rhapsody to the virtues of LSD, which, it seems to me, would cause anybody who desires to be virtuous, assuming that he is impressed by what you say, to rush out and try to find this stuff. You say that it increases your experience, it increases your sense of love, it increases your sense of harmony, it increases your sense of perception, that it is to the modern world what the books were to the discoverer of books, that it is to the immediate world what the discovery of matter was, and so on and so forth. But you refuse to say, let's all go out and take a trip together. Now, I don't think it's lack of conviction on your part. I think it's a technique. Whether it's a conscious technique or something that was vouchsafed to you on one of your trips, I don't know. But I'm interested in that. Why don't you just say everybody ought to take LSD? Or is this a legal thing?
The key to our religion, Bill, and to our politics and to our economics is individual freedom. I have no right to tell anyone what to do with their... Pardon?
What does that got to do with individual freedom? I'm individual
I have
freedom.
no right to tell anyone else what to do with your body. Your body is the temple of God.
You can say brush your teeth without interfering with their freedom, can't you?
I don't want, there'll be a law, the Dental Society will pass a law pretty soon saying I've got to brush my teeth, and with so-and-so...
Who's talking about laws? I'm not saying we're going to have a law in which you require people to take LSD. I'm talking about you as an evangelist. And I don't know what you're doing here if you're not an evangelist. But I want to know why this schizophrenia...
I'm trying to share time with a mind that I tremendously respect. I want to get you interested in this problem of millions of Americans having St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine experiences. It's happening around you. I want to turn you on, Bill. I want to get you to drop out. I admire this man very much, and it's a tragedy to me that one of the greatest minds in America is involved with such trivia as the mayoralty election in New York. Or, you're much too big for this.
I agree. How about one that?
I want to turn you on and drop you out.
Yeah, but what would have happened? What would have happened if Saint Augustine had taken this stuff? The answer is that he probably never would have been conscious to write those travails, which are the most beautiful monuments to human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was.
You wouldn't have heard of his name if he had
about 3 weeks ago on the beach. In St. Augustine, you will get one of the best descriptions of an LSD experience which has ever been written. It's right down there, the 5 levels of consciousness. St. Augustine took a trip.
St. Augustine, Florida.
And St. Thomas Aquinas, as you well know, at the end of his life, after all those years writing the Summa, said it's all a bale of straw compared to that one great high that he got towards the end of his life. There's so much in this that you're just about to turn on them. You're just about to turn on.
What you're doing is co-opting any moment of historical sublimity as exactly equal to the kind of thing that you're able to produce in a $5 sugar cube.
Now, that's not true.
Well,
People
it
say
is
to me,
true.
how can it be that you can take just this little pill? Because that's not what's involved. Any American today who takes LSD is taking it in defiance of the American Medical Association. Every doctor's warning you, you'll lose your mind, you'll lose your body if you do it. And if you do it anyway, that's more than a $5 kick. You're laying your blue chips on the line, as men have always done in history when they've had this experience. And the beauty of the AMA position denouncing LSD, I love it because it really tests the sincerity and the courage of a person who takes this trip. The trip has always been difficult. It's the trip of death and rebirth. It's the trip of Ulysses. It's the trip of Dante. It's the death-rebirth experience. And I'm delighted.
See, what are the AMA's motives? I gather they're sinister because of the charade you went through. Well, what are the motives? What is it that causes them to give bad advice intentionally?
Caesar is always tempted to turn people off.
Now, wait a minute.
Well, Mr. Buckley, perhaps it's the same thing that urges them to recommend fluoridation, which is compulsory medication. Perhaps it's the desire of organizations to have their way.
Control.
Yeah, but that isn't sinister. If dentists recommend fluoridation on the grounds that that's going to reduce cavities, I wouldn't consider that sinisterly motivated. But if doctors are saying that the more people who take LSD, the more cases of illness you're going to have, it seems to me it would be sinister if they didn't recommend against taking it. That's why I want something to justify Dr. Leary's contempt of the medical profession for giving us this advice, something I can understand.
I wasn't contempt. I'm glad they're doing it, because today anyone who takes LSD knows he's running a risk. And let me say that
the doctors, not
you
the
are
students.
running a risk if you take LSD. You're going to really be confronted. So that I'm not really being contemptuous of the AMA. The stronger Caesar's legions are, the happier we are, because that means the ball game is playing out with greater energy.
Mr. Buckley, you keep coming back to drugs all the time. Do you agree or not agree in the evils of modern society that Dr. Leary keeps emphasizing?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
You think the Conservative Party is the better solution?
But as somebody said a moment ago, that actually, of course I do. Of course I do.
You think the Conservative Party is the better solution?
But as somebody said a moment ago, that actually, if you find people who are acutely pressed, emotionally or psychologically, you'll find that they're exactly pressed by the problems that pressed people 2,000 years ago and 1,500 years ago. And the existence of the bomb is in and of itself interesting, but the pressure that each of us feels individually is not greater, for instance, than that that was felt by somebody living in Rome, not knowing whether 2 days later he would be alive.
From alive.
That's right.
Yes.
And I think that it is true that chemistry has come along, as Dr. Leary has shown us, and has given us an opiate, i.e. it has made popularly available little quickie means by which we can force ourselves through chemical means to get away.
You could say the same thing about the printing press.
But what happens, is, and let me quote somebody I respect very much, a psychoanalyst in New York, who says, as his tolerance, the drug taker, for life without drugs increases, his competence for such life diminishes, so that with every return to the drug he is, in the spirit of Heraclitus, a different and lesser person who attempts to cross the same stream twice. That's why I think the more people rely on drugs, the more incompetent they become to handle life without them. And under the circumstances, they end up mostly complete addicts.
Dr. Leary, you were comparing the present situation with the late Roman Empire, where the serfs deserted the plantations and took to the mountains. If people today take LSD, won't their ability to go to the mountains and live a self-sufficient life be seriously impaired?
By LSD?
Yes.
No, yes, you're laboring in a misapprehension that LSD is like booze, that you shoot it up and stagger around. You can do anything that you do normally better if you know how to use LSD. I'm not making any guarantee here. You can drive a car better. I've often told this story.
You can go over Niagara Falls better, can't you?
Well, if that's your trip, Bill. My trip, your trip seems to lead people to Niagara Falls or the mental hospital. My trip leads people out to the country, away from this horrible city, and we can make a living.
Yes, but that requires vigor, energy, strength. And I'm afraid that Mr. Buckley is afraid that they'll lose that vigor through taking LSD. You disagree.
Look around at the people who are taking LSD. I don't want to use the word vigor because I know that has political overtones today, which I wouldn't want to go along with. But the LSD movement, I think, has betrayed a great deal of vigor to have brought about this, this mass movement. We haven't been sitting around, Bill, just shooting up and contemplating our navel and the glories of our own intuitions. We've been changing your society almost as fast as you can.
Imperceptibly.
Pardon? Now, whether you like it or not, Bill, you must grant that we've been activists and we've been rather effective at it. And I would say this is one testimony to the fact that the drug doesn't set you off into some passive...
Well, you don't have to be activist. The man who invented whiskey didn't have to be an activist.
Mr. Buckley, we have one more question for you.
I'm just wondering if one can tune in, turn on, and not drop out, and thereby reorganize the experiences one is having. So perhaps if Mr. Buckley would tune in, turn on, and not drop out, and thereby become mayor, could he, for example, function as a mayor?
Why don't you handle that? An anticlimax like Forgotten Yale.
I feel very good tonight, and I have a great deal of affection and respect for you. I do feel you're misusing your God-given talents, which is so easy for a Yale graduate to do. And I want to appeal to you at the level of kind of a challenge that if you examine the philosophic and ontological issues of the Cyberback Revolution, I think you'll see some overtones from the history of the Catholic Church. And in many respects, I would be more at home, Bill, in the Middle Ages, because the things that obsess us and concern us at Millbrook is what is the meaning of God? The basic ontological questions, what is real? And in a funny way, we're combining the Middle Ages, which I think is not a dark ages, but indeed an age of tremendous meaning and dedication, with the electronic age, because we can't throw out electronics. And no one is more concerned with this IBM...
than everybody who can loosely be called a conservative.
The guest on tonight's William Buckley program is Dr. Timothy Leary, and we'll continue in just a moment.
Gentlemen, we must bring this most interesting discussion to a close. We are out of time. Thank you, Dr. Leary. Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Funding for a grievance against someone who murdered for hire.
Carter exercised his executive authority to commute a sentence that had Rickman and yes, stances he'd. Gordon Liddy, as everybody knows, is the Watergate plumber who refused to talk, muttering something about the obligations to the prince, and accepting for his pains a prison sentence which at one point ran to 21.5 years plus $40,000 in fine. Those who concern themselves with that kind of thing researched his crime, breaking and entering no previous record, and remarked that under normal circumstances he'd have been given a 30-day suspended sentence. But it was felt in 1972 and 1973 that perhaps Gordon Liddy, more than anyone, including even his Confederate Howard Hart, had hold of the secret information necessary to hang John Mitchell, John Ehrlichman, and yes, even Richard Nixon. So as long as he wouldn't talk, he was sent off to jail. It wasn't until the spring of 1977 that a President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, exercised his executive authority to commute a sentence that had struck an increasing number of Americans as outrageous. Mr. Liddy, out of jail, still declines to talk about Watergate, but is much interested in penology. In that sense only, I suppose he is to be compared to James Hoffa, who on this program spoke not at all about his life, soon to be abbreviated, as former head of the Teamsters Union, but rather about life in prison. Gordon Liddy was a former prosecutor, former FBI agent, former candidate for congressman from Dutchess County. He is a graduate of the Fordham Law School, and about Watergate since leaving jail has said only this, that under similar circumstances he would do it all again. We are not privy to what these circumstances are. Mr. Charles Cordry of the Baltimore Sun will help us during the period of the examination later in the program. In an article called Serving Time in America, written for Esquire magazine, Gordon Liddy begins, quotes, "For those whose understanding of prison life is predicated upon early Warner Brothers films depicting George Raft banging a tin cup against his cell bars, or more recently the introspective musings of John Dean in Newsweek, based upon his 4 months of tender loving care as the prize canary of the Watergate Special Prosecution Forces, I offer first my credentials. These credentials were 44 months in 8 jails. I should like to begin by asking Mr. Liddy whether he believes there is a Christian obligation on the part of a criminal to make amends.
Well, first of all, that would depend upon whether the criminal were indeed a Christian. Many are not. I would say that it is my understanding of the Christian religion that if one injures another, one ought, as best one can, to make him whole again and repair the injury. It is my understanding that for Roman Catholics, that is a precondition of absolution.
Well, you are a Roman Catholic.
I was raised Roman Catholic.
You were raised Roman Catholic. Is it safe to say that a court's informant is in a position to make amends by cooperating with the prosecution to the extent of permitting society to catch people there up until then undetected in their malefaction?
It's correct to say that someone with that information is in such a position, yes. That is not to say that he ought to do it.
Well, then I take it that you have revised the Christian mandate in respect of making amends.
No, I do not presume to revise the Christian or any other religious mandate. I follow my own conscience in that regard, and if that differs from the Christian or the Judaic or the Muslim or any other, so be it.
Well, I don't think that there's any reason to doubt what is really universal, which is that people are going to do what they want to do. The question is whether there is a structured ethical analysis that justifies your position, which seems to be generically opposed to the, quote, informant. Now, was Whittaker Chambers say to be despised?
He certainly was by the communists who were his former
I wasn't talking about
associates.
that.
Yes, I would say so.
In other words, would people who gave testimony against the exterminators of Dachau and Belsen to be despised?
No, I would not say so. I'd say that they were trying to kill those who killed them. I go along with that.
you're saying that the people who gave testimony against the exterminators gave testimony against people who were trying to kill them. In what sense is that different?
Well, those who were giving I'm sorry, I interrupted you in the question.
Well, in what sense is that different from a former communist giving testimony against people who seek to enslave other people, including themselves and their families?
If you adhere to an ideology, thereafter recant it or disagree with it for whatever reason, and then attack your former associates, that's one proposition. The Jews who were the victims of the Nazi persecution were not in themselves Nazis. They were not persons who were former associates of the Nazis betraying their former associates. They were persons who were the targets of attempts at murder, and they fought back in many different ways, and one of the ways they continued to fight, because they believed that the Nazi menace is not dead and buried completely, is to try to bury anybody whom they believe still subscribes to the beliefs which put into being Belsen, Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and the other places.
Well, but if we are to learn from the Odyssey of Saul, aren't we convinced that it is especially a mandate of someone who knew and participated in wickedness to mount such efforts as he can to dissuade his former Confederates from their chosen paths, and that among the ways in which he agitates against them is not merely a direct attempt at conversion, as Paul engaged in, but also active resistance.
Well, it's one thing to attempt to persuade one's former co-adherents of a particular point of view to the now subjectively perceived error of that point of view. It's another thing to try to put them in jail.
Well, what do you do in a situation in which the person whom you have been unsuccessful in persuading is left either in jail or free to pursue a course, the effect of which may be the hurting of innocent people?
Well, now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, and that is that if I adhere to a particular set of beliefs and you adhere to another set of beliefs, I consider yours to be evil, you consider mine to be evil. Both our subjective understandings. What do we do about each other? Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro would stand you up against the wall and shoot you if he had the opportunity. I think he would probably expect that had the other side the opportunity, they would do the same to him or attempt. And indeed, we now learn that with respect to the brothers Kennedy, there was a similar understanding of the situation. But whether or not that is the thing to do depends upon the beliefs to which one subscribes at the time.
Well, your use of the word subjective seems to attempt to communicate that you're reluctant, that you consider it hubristic to assign any objective validity to one particular point of view as against another. The fact that you and I might disagree certainly suggests that we are subjectively separated, but it doesn't mean that we're not also objectively separated in respect of what is correct and what is not. I doubt very much that when you were in prison, you felt any ideological sympathy for people who were guilty, let's say, of murder for hire. But I also am confused by your article because you seemed to superordinate the virtue of silence over against any virtue in cooperating to frustrate people who engage in murder for hire.
Now, I think that if you're going to frustrate people who murder for hire, let them die by the sword as well as live by it. I don't think one ought to lower oneself to becoming an informant to do it. Now, if I had a grievance against someone who murdered for hire, I would, if I were, let me put it this way, if one is going to discuss this, I think we have to make a distinction between the man on the street who is the witness to a crime. He's walking along minding his own business or something and he sees a crime occur. And someone who is an associate of someone committing the crime. I have no antipathy toward a witness who testifies as to what he saw. By the same token, I have no respect whatsoever for the cohort who seeks to relieve his newly found predicament at the expense of his erstwhile associate, be that in a criminal enterprise or any other.
Well, I think it's interesting that you have no sympathy for him. But
I will go farther and say that I would not approve of his attempting to extricate himself that way.
But I think what is interesting is any attempt for you to give a structure of ethical authority to this particular position. If, for instance, you were a member of a terrorist gang, the business of which was, let's say, to kidnap and mutilate systematically, and one day you woke up the beneficiary of a changed view of life, I understand you to be saying that you would not permit yourself to inform on the continuing activities, notwithstanding that in your new perception you understood them to be despicable, and that therefore the kidnapping and the mutilation and the rape and the murder would continue rather than cause you to act out the role of an informant. Now, if this happens to be a crotchet of yours, shouldn't you so designate it without attempting that Kantian universalization, which is really rather corrupting of a position which is considered to be uncivilized?
No, because I think that the way you have just stated it would perhaps lead someone to believe that were I the beneficiary of this changed point of view, that the only alternative to so far as I was concerned, the continued killing and mutilation and so on and so forth, would be my turning informer, and that's not so. I could turn and make war upon my former associates by honorably attempting to meet them in battle and kill them.
Well, there's no question, and certainly very little question in your case, about your resources of personal heroism. But if let's say you defected from an organization like the Black Septembrists with 700 or 800 people, the notion that you, like Superman, could turn around and wipe them out is unrealistic. Whereas the notion that you could wipe them out by enlisting the paramilitary reserves of the West highly maximize your chances and highly maximize the possibility that innocent people would escape unheard. Is it an act really of selfishness to yield to your own distrust and dislike of informants up against such situation?
No, and I think it may be a bit ingenuous of you to suggest that what I meant was that I would change into my cape and charge after them. There's nothing wrong with if I've now become their enemy, join the paramilitary unit you're speaking of and fight. But I just don't lead them. I don't lead them to where I believe Tondaleo Schwarzkopf or somebody happens to have her headquarters at the moment. Of course, if Tondaleo Schwarzkopf is all that good a terrorist, her headquarters won't remain the same for very long anyway.
I do understand you then to be saying that you would join the active battle against your former associates, but you would not use such information as you were privy to in the light of your past experiences. That is the Liddy law of correct behavior for people who recognize, who graduate from the one to the other state.
Well, stated not as I would state it, but substantially the same.
Were you in sympathy during the 20s, during the 40s and 50s and 60s, with people who, having escaped from the communist movement, cooperated with the FBI or with congressional committees or with other governmental bodies who sought to frustrate the enemy?
In sympathy with no, but to use them, certainly. As a prosecutor, I used informants as often as I could get them. And in the FBI, there's a saying that one good informer is worth 1,000 miles of shoe leather. It's true. That doesn't mean that because I used them or exploited them that I respected them.
But did you feel a contempt for them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that
you can call it the Jippo-Nolan syndrome if you wish.
The what?
The Jippo-Nolan syndrome, perhaps.
What is that?
Well, there's a classic film called The Informer, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
And the chief character, protagonist being Jippo-Nolan.
Mm-hmm. James Mason?
No, I believe it was Victor McLaughlin.
Oh, yeah. But now, the position that you hold is, of course, not widely held. And
I've held positions like that before.
What's that? What's that?
I say I have held positions like that before.
Yeah. And the question then arises whether a society holding different positions isn't entitled to codify them and give them such legal authority as they can. If you have a society that says somebody who was once a functioning member of Murder Incorporated has an abiding responsibility to relieve himself of the charge of misprision of felony by reporting on the felonious enterprises and ambitions of his former associates. Now, you grew up in a society in which that is the accepted practice. Do you understand yourself to be personally immune from that discipline? Or do you understand that that the society itself is benighted that adopts that code?
Well, the practice is accepted in that it was engaged in. I don't believe it was admired. I think that at least the people that I grew up with held those who engaged in it from the point of view as the informer in very low regard. They certainly did not object to the government doing whatever it could. And if you will go to prison, and I suggest that there are easier ways of finding these things out, but if you would go to prison, you would find that amongst the professional criminals, there is no real animosity toward, for example, the police, whom they consider to be their legitimate opponents. They consider those persons as just doing their job, and they know that if a person who's a police officer procures or otherwise obtains the use of an informant, he is doing that. It's the informant against whom the animosity, let us know, is held.
No, I think this is quite obvious. What is not obvious is that you should show so much sympathy for a point of view that really rejects the ultimate responsibility of civil society, which is to conscript the services of all of its members for the purpose of guarding life, limb, and property. Take your case, and I assure you I won't trespass past the line that we agreed I should do. In your case, there was a very considerable sympathy for punishments that were considered to be less than condign. That is to say, you refused to cooperate with the Congressional Committee, you refused to cooperate with the courts, and you took uncomplaining a tremendous sentence. In due course, people began to go to your defense from both sides of the ideological spectrum. Now, did it occur to you during the time that you were being defended that there was a certain ruthless irony in the situation, i.e. you were willing to use the whole of your resources as someone refusing to cooperate, but were prepared to accept the sympathy of people who thought that the state ought to use less than the whole of its resources to prevail against you?
They would never have prevailed.
No, they wouldn't have prevailed. You made that, I think, quite plain. But they could have...
in that case, it was a vain act.
No, but no, well, it was a vain act in respect of yourself, but not necessarily a vain act in respect of other people who were students of your behavior. That is to say, the Gordon Liddy Juniors of this world might, observing you grow very old and gray at Danbury, as a result of your failure to cooperate, decide, if their turn came, to elect the course of cooperation.
Well, there were quite a few who were not Gordon Liddy Juniors who, as you know, took them a very brief period of time to elect precisely that. I think just the mere fact of my sentence, as you know, persuaded some of my weaker brethren of the opposite point of view.
Well, now you say weaker brethren on the grounds that you assume that their inclination to cooperate was exclusively an act of self-indulgence. Don't you admit the possibility that some of your, quote, weaker brethren actually recognized that civil society depends on the rule of law rather than on individual behavior, however heroically motivated?
I admit the possibility, I deny the probability.
Well, if you deny the probability, it must be because you have available, and I'd be interested in your documentation of it, a burden of empirical evidence that suggests that frontier justice, or individually defined justice, tends to work better than the law.
Don't understand the question.
Well, you say you deny the probability that a society dominated by law is going to work better in behalf of individual justice and freedom than one in which individual members of society can take the law into their own hands.
No, what I said I admitted, what I said I denied. What I believe you had said was that, did I admit the possibility that those particular individuals, and we're dealing now with particular people, had taken the decision they took for reasons other than their own interests. And yes, I admit the possibility. But no, I deny the probability.
Stated in another way, knowing the cast of characters, your guess is that the reason they cooperated with the government was not because all of a sudden they woke up having journeyed toward Damascus, but because they simply felt that it would be, on the whole, more pleasant to spend time out of jail than in jail. Right?
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't exclude the possibility that people involved in those enterprises genuinely decided somewhere along the line that they were wrong, right?
It's not excluded.
Would you care to comment on whether or not there was a shifting ethical perception that you thought might be persuasive? Let me give you an example. Suppose somebody came to us an hour from now and said, we want you to take this drastic action in order to prevent the assassination of the President of the United States. And you and I did so, but subsequently learned that the assassination of the President of the United States was not, in fact, a possibility. We would quite reasonably, retrospectively, rue that which led us on to these extralegal events, right? There wasn't some situation.
If someone had deceived you, yeah, I would think that it would be reasonable for you to be angry with the person who had deceived you in so serious a matter, yes.
Or even if you had deceived yourself as regards perspective. So suppose that which you saw as imminent danger turned out not to be imminent danger. Would you therefore rue the excesses that you underwent?
Well, you see, your question is loaded with the word excess right there. I wouldn't use that word excess. With respect to myself or anything that I have done,